A child stands motionless as something eats him from the inside, claws shredding intestines, teeth grinding through muscle, blood pooling in fabric. He doesn't scream, doesn't move, doesn't even blink. When they finally dismiss him, his organs are shredded beyond repair. Multiple ancient historians documented this incident because it represented perfection. Welcome to a place where 7-year-olds were legally kidnapped by the government, where starvation was curriculum, where murder was a graduation requirement, and where the most celebrated moment in a boy's life was dying quietly while being devoured alive. This is Sparta's Agoge, the most sophisticated child abuse program ever designed. And here's the truly disturbing part. It worked so perfectly that it annihilated them. Let's start with the situation that created this nightmare. Imagine being surrounded, not by enemies with swords, but by your own slaves. 9,000 of you, 200,000 of them. They're not foreigners. They speak your language, worship your gods, walk your streets, grow your food. They know where your children sleep. They remember when their grandparents were free, before your great-grandparents conquered them and turned them into property. They're called helots, and they outnumber you 20 to 1. You can't leave because Spartan law forbids extensive travel. You re-trapped in a valley with people who have every reason to slit your throat while you sleep. So every single year, Sparta formally declared war on the helots. Not metaphorical war. Legal, official, documented war. This made killing any helot at any time, for any reason, a legitimate act of warfare rather than murder. Think about the psychology required to wake up every morning in that reality. You're surrounded by people who despise you, who vastly outnumber you, who could poison your wine or burn your house or organize an uprising that would drown you in blood. You have two choices: live in perpetual terror or eliminate the capacity for fear entirely. Sparta chose elimination, but that required something unprecedented. Soldiers feel fear. Soldiers have breaking points. Soldiers possess this inconvenient thing called conscience that sometimes interferes with orders. Sparta needed something that couldn't break, wouldn't question, and didn't possess enough independent thought to experience moral hesitation. They needed weapons that looked like children. The Agoge was the answer, and it began before birth. When a Spartan woman went into labor, she wasn't praying for a healthy baby. She was praying for a baby that would pass inspection. Because newborns didn't belong to their parents. They belonged to the state, and the state had standards. The infant was brought before the Gerousia, a council of men over 60 who examined its body with the clinical detachment of farmers inspecting livestock. They looked for deformities, unusual proportions, any hint of future weakness. Modern scholars debate what happened to the rejects. The popular image involves a chasm called the apothete, where defective babies were hurled to their deaths, though this might be later propaganda. But exposure was absolutely real and documented across Greece. An unwanted infant was placed outside city limits and left to die from elements, animals, or occasionally rescued by someone desperate enough to raise a child that wasn't theirs. Either way, fathers sometimes returned home empty-handed. For those who passed, childhood was a brief postponement of institutional hell. You stayed with your mother until 7. You learned to speak, to walk, to understand that you were Spartan, which meant you were fundamentally different from other Greeks. Different in the same way a hunting dog is different from a wolf, specifically bred and trained for absolute obedience. At 7, the kidnapping happened. Not gradual, not gentle. One morning you slept in your mother's house. That night, you slept in a barracks with 100 other boys under the supervision of a young man, barely older than you, who had absolute authority over your body. The transition was designed to be traumatic. Trauma breaks down existing identity. The barracks weren't designed for comfort. Boys slept on reeds. They cut themselves from the river. In winter, they could add thistle down. That was the extent of bedding. 1 cloak per year. No shoes ever, not in summer, not in winter. not on rocky terrain that shredded feet until they developed calluses thick as leather. This wasn't accidental cruelty. Spartan military doctrine depended on rapid movement over difficult ground. Shoes could be lost. Feet couldn't, but the most calculated element was hunger. They were fed daily, but never enough. Rations were deliberately insufficient. A boy finished every meal hungry, went to bed hungry, woke hungry, existed in a permanent state of caloric deficit that made his body consume itself. This wasn't neglect. It was policy. Because hungry boys had to steal to survive. Not from merchants. Sparta didn't have those. Not from outside the training grounds. They couldn't leave. They stole from each other, from storage facilities, from communal messes. And here's the mechanism that made it brilliant. Stealing wasn't punished. Getting caught was punished. Steal successfully? You eat. You survive. You've demonstrated the resourcefulness a Spartan needs. Get caught? You're beaten publicly, viciously, in front of your entire unit. Not because theft is wrong, because incompetence is unacceptable. The moral lesson wasn't about honesty. It was about success. The only sin was failure. This created an environment where boys learned to move silently, to plan carefully, to trust no one, and to understand that suffering was preferable to exposure. Ancient sources preserve this story because it wasn't unusual. It was exemplary. The boy had stolen a fox, probably to eat it, possibly as a test of nerve. He hid it under his cloak. During an inspection, the animal panicked and began tearing into him, claws ripping through skin, teeth grinding into muscle, blood soaking fabric. The boy stood perfectly still, face neutral, as his insides were shredded. He maintained that posture until dismissed. Then he collapsed and died. Modern readers hear this and think it's insane, suicidal, missing the point entirely. Death was preferable to revealing weakness. Physical destruction was preferable to social disgrace. Pain was irrelevant compared to failure. This story circulated for centuries afterward as inspiration, as the standard, as proof the system worked. The boys were organized into herds, literal translation, because that's what they were. Livestock being conditioned for slaughter. Each herd had a leader, the Iron, usually around 20 years old. He possessed absolute authority, could order punishments, participated in beatings. His word was divine law. But he was also being evaluated constantly. His leadership determined his own advancement. The system was self-perpetuating. The victim became the enforcer. The enforcer knew his enforcement was being judged. Every interaction was observed. Every moment was a test. There were no private spaces, no solitude, no opportunity to develop identity separate from group surveillance. This is the environment where human personality typically forms. Ages 7 through 20, the years when people develop their sense of self, their values, their conception of relationships. Instead, there was only the group, only hierarchy, only the state watching everything. Emotional attachment to family was systematically exterminated. Boys didn't go home for holidays. Mothers didn't visit barracks. One Spartan mother, in an anecdote preserved because it was considered admirable, sent her son to battle with instructions to return with his shield or on it, victory or death. Modern readers think that's just dramatic encouragement. Listen to what it actually means. Come back victorious or come back dead. Do not come back defeated. Do not return if you fled. Do not show your face if you dropped your shield to run faster. If you return alive and unsuccessful, you're not welcome. That's not support. That's a threat from his mother. The Agoge didn't just condition boys. It conditioned the entire society to enforce the same values. Mothers, wives, sisters, everyone participated in the machinery of shame. Physical training was constant. Wrestling, running, combat drills. But ancient sources emphasize the physical component was secondary. Plutarch explicitly states the Agoge was designed to produce obedience, endurance, and victory in battle in that order. Obedience first, always. The most brutal test was the diamestigses, the whipping ordeal at the altar of Artemis Orthia. Boys were whipped in front of spectators, not as punishment, but as demonstration. The goal was enduring without crying out, without showing pain, for as long as possible. Some died during the ritual. This was documented in later periods as a spectacle that attracted Roman tourists who came specifically to watch. Spartan boys bleed for entertainment. By then, Sparta was a shell, a theme park of its former power. But during its height, this wasn't performance. It was conditioning. You will suffer. You will not react. Your body isn't yours. Your pain isn't yours. You exist for the state. Around age 18 or 19, a selection occurred. The most capable, most loyal, most thoroughly broken boys were chosen for something that made even ancient historians uncomfortable. The cryptia, the secret thing, the hidden practice. Thucydides mentions it. Plato references it. Plutarch describes it with unusual unease. Aristotle calls it disturbing, and when a Greek philosopher who wrote extensively about slavery and infanticide calls something disturbing, pay attention. Here's what happened. Selected youths were sent alone into Helot territories. They received a knife, sometimes a short sword, no armor, no supplies. By day they hid in countryside, invisible, undetected. By night they moved. Their targets were helots, specifically helots identified as strong, capable, or defiant. The ones who might lead rebellion. The ones who might organize resistance. The ones who looked too proud. The youths killed them quietly in darkness, without trial, without warning, without hesitation, then returned to hiding. This continued for weeks, possibly months. Scholars debate frequency and scale, but sources are consistent on one point. It happened. The purpose wasn't military. Helots were unarmed. They weren't enemy soldiers. The purpose was psychological. Think about what this does to an 18-year-old brain. You've spent 11 years learning that obedience is survival, that suffering is normal, that your identity is collective. Now you're told to kill someone who hasn't attacked you, someone unarmed, someone enslaved by your own state. Kill them in secret. Don't hesitate. Don't question. If you hesitate, you failed. If you question, you're not fully loyal. This is the final test, the last severing. The final potential attachment to shared humanity is cut away. You're not a Greek among Greeks. You're not a person with moral boundaries. You're a Spartan. You do what the state requires. If that means murdering an unarmed man in darkness because he looked too strong, too capable, too proud, then that's what you do. The ones who returned without hesitation, without trauma, without doubt, those became full citizens. The cryptia was a filter separating those who still possessed limits from those who didn't. At 20, you became a full-time soldier, but you didn't become independent. You lived in barracks still, ate in communal messes, every meal supervised and ritualized. The food was deliberately unpleasant. The famous black broth was notorious, even in ancient times. One foreign visitor, after tasting it, reportedly said he now understood why Spartans were so willing to die. The point wasn't nutrition. It was uniformity. Luxury was weakness. Pleasure was distraction. Marriage was technically allowed, but Spartan men didn't live with wives. They visited at night in secret, then returned to barracks before dawn. Children were born, but fathers didn't raise them. The state did. At 30, after 23 years in the system, a man finally achieved full citizenship. He could attend assembly, could vote, but he still lived in barracks, still ate communal meals, still trained daily. This continued until age 60, from 7 to 60. 53 years of institutional living, of surveillance, of ritualized behavior. By 60, you've spent the vast majority of your existence in this system. There is no you separate from it. There is no identity formed outside institutional control. The result was exactly what Sparta needed. In battle, Spartan units didn't break, didn't flee, didn't panic. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held a mountain pass against hundreds of thousands. They held for 3 days. They died in formation. At Plataea, Spartan infantry held their line while allied forces collapsed around them. They turned near defeat into crushing victory. For nearly 2 centuries, Sparta dominated Greek warfare, not because Spartans were stronger or faster or more skilled, but because fear of disgrace exceeded fear of death, because running was worse than dying, because the group was everything and the individual was nothing. The Agoge worked perfectly, but systems optimized for one thing fail at everything else. Sparta's citizen population declined steadily. Standards were too high. Not every boy survived. Disease, accidents, brutality itself. Some didn't reach 20, and citizenship requirements were rigid. You had to complete the Agoge, contribute to communal messes, own land worked by helots. As land concentrated among fewer families, fewer men met property requirements. They lost citizenship. War casualties removed citizens permanently. Sparta had no reserves, no broader population. Every death was irreplaceable. By 371 BC, when Sparta faced Thebes at Leuctra, their army was smaller than a century prior. They lost decisively. The Theban general used an innovative formation that crushed the Spartan right flank. In one afternoon, Sparta lost approximately 400 citizens from a total population that may have numbered only 1,500 full citizens. That's over a quarter of their entire citizenship. Dead. In one battle, there were no replacements. The system that produced perfect soldiers had no mechanism for recovery, no flexibility, no adaptation. You couldn't recruit foreigners. They weren't Spartan. You couldn't shorten training. That would compromise the product. You couldn't expand citizenship criteria. That would dilute standards. The machine could only do one thing. When it broke, it couldn't be fixed. Within decades, Sparta became a secondary power. By the Roman period, it was a tourist attraction. Visitors came to watch whipping rituals, to see remnants of a society that once terrified the Greek world. The Agoge continued in modified form for centuries, but it was performance. Recreation of a dead system for an audience that no longer feared it. The society that sacrificed everything for military perfection achieved that perfection, then collapsed because perfection in one dimension creates catastrophic fragility in all others. Sparta's secret wasn't brutality. Lots of ancient societies were brutal. The secret was precision. The Agoge was social engineering, systematic and calculated, designed to eliminate every variable that might produce disobedience. It worked exactly as intended. It produced warriors who couldn't be broken and a society that couldn't survive. What remains is documentation, cross-referenced across multiple sources. Descriptions that make modern readers uncomfortable because they're not mythology. They're procedure. Instructions for dismantling a human being and rebuilding them as something that doesn't question, doesn't hesitate, doesn't break until the system itself breaks. And when it does, there's nothing left but tourists watching children bleed for entertainment.